Tuesday Night Touchdown Podcast with your hosts, Reese Downing and Jacob Workman.
What's up, everyone? Tuesday Night Touchdown College Football Edition. This is our Big Ten preview as we've been running through the Power 4 conferences now. Joining today on the co-host side, our friend Reese. Reese, what's up over there?
What's going on, brother? How are you?
Oh, pretty good, pretty good. So the Big Ten's a little interesting. We're adding 4 teams this year, all from the former Pac-12, Washington, USC, UCLA, and Oregon. What are your thoughts on some of these additions to the conference?
We just continue to go down this path of super conferences. 4 really fun teams to bring into the Big Ten. Definitely elevates the the power behind some of the teams that are on this. I mean, there's not really any teams to shake a stick at, so to speak, possibly UCLA, but even that team tends to play really well against some of these bigger opponents. So it'll be interesting to see the transition of some of these high-powered offenses into the Big Ten Conference that historically has been a little bit more defensive-minded. So it'll be interesting to watch Oregon, Washington, USC try to throw up the same offensive numbers that they've been used to putting up in the Pac-12. So it'll be a fun year.
True, and yeah, that's going to pit some of those teams in some real interesting road games too. Like I think UCLA, I think they are going to log the most travel miles of any college football team in history this year. So they have. I know we're not really getting into their schedule today, but their schedule is insane. Like I think they hit Hawaii, I think they hit Louisiana, I think they go to Rutgers. Like they're literally all over the world. Like that, it's not a good start for first year coach Deshaun Foster there. Let's go ahead and get into look at some conference championship odds and win totals. So coming in, the betting favorite for conference championship is Ohio State. I don't think that's really a surprise to anyone at plus 160. Newcomer to the conference, Oregon, is second at plus 210. Penn State, we talked quite a bit about Penn State last year at plus 500 to win. Penn State's an interesting team. Last year, you were very big on them. I was kind of like I didn't think they were going to be terrible, but we definitely got to see a little bit more from Drew Aller this year. Like I think we were expecting much more from him last year. I know the former Indiana head coach is now their defensive coordinator with Manny Diaz going to coach at Duke. I think that's a big addition. I think their defense will be much better. Tom Allen, I believe is his name. I can't think of his name right now, but I believe it's Tom Allen. But I think that's going to be a huge addition for James Franklin at Penn State. Obviously, Michigan at plus 700, losing Jim Harbaugh is a big deal. Brand new quarterback. And then another newcomer to the conference. This is where the odds start getting a little longer. USC at plus 2,000. So, Reese, looking at this, what are some things that stand out to you first for the conference championship odds?
Yeah, we're gonna get to James Franklin and Penn State here in a little bit, but the first thing I want to call out here is that both Michigan and Indiana do not have formal mascots, I should say. So we gave them some historical greats here for the university. First and foremost, the guy we have in the bottom right corner here, if you're watching this on YouTube, is George Taliaferro. Wearing number 79. He's the first African-American player to ever be drafted into the NFL, and he is Indiana Hoosier alum, so that's who we throw in here.
He's got one hell of a face going on there, too.
And he's doing the full-on Heisman. You just can't really see it there.
Right.
For Michigan, we gave you guys the wondrous Stephen Threet. That's what you get for having an actual animal for a team name, and you don't take the opportunity to bless the world with an actual mascot.
We should have used Connor Stallions.
We were looking at a couple guys. 3-2 he ended up on, but everything here looks pretty lined up how it should be. I think I'm a little surprised to see Michigan State so low. They performed pretty well in the transfer portal, turned in a top 12 performance. Keep an eye on Nebraska here. Bit of a tough schedule, but this will be the second year under Matt Rule. Dylan Raiola and those guys, I can see them performing potentially above expectations. But overall, I think things are pretty well in line.
Yeah, and with Michigan State, too, obviously Jonathan Smith coming over from Oregon State, bringing with him quarterback Aiden Childs, who was behind DJU Youngagala last year. DJU last year. He actually got quite a bit of playing time, and everyone kind of saw him as the future. So I think that was a big get to bring him over to Michigan State. All right, so we've looked at the odds here. So, Reese, if we're going for your favorite for conference championship and your conference win total, what do you have?
Yeah, so taking a look at that stuff here, starting with my favorite bet for the conference championship, it's hard for me to not go with Ohio State. Looking at their schedule, I just don't see them losing more than one game. It's the Big Ten, so some of these road games could be tough. Starting with the East Lansing game here on September 28th when they travel to face Sparty. They're going to have to make the trip to Eugene to battle the Ducks and Autzen, and that's a game I have circled as the road game I think that they're most likely to lose. Road game at Happy Valley is another one, but Penn State's just so unpredictable, and this Buckeye team is loaded. So I don't think they're going to have a problem winning that game. Ohio State could give up 30 a game to all of these teams, and it's not going to matter with this offense so long as everyone stays healthy. So I've got Ohio State at plus 160 for the Big Ten championship odds. My total win bet, I've got Michigan in the under. So we know Sharon Moore's strength is with the defense, but the problem is on the offensive side of the ball. All 5 offensive linemen, JJ McCarthy, Blake Corum, Roman Wilson, they're all gone. And if you look at the schedule, it's a 1-game flip for me, but they're going to need some lightning in a bottle to get to 9-3. So if we're looking at the schedule here, starting the season off with Fresno State, nobody knows likely better than you that game is not necessarily a lock. I do have them winning that, so we'll move them to 1-1 or 1-0 there. Week 2, they host Texas. I think they are handed their first loss in that one, so that takes them to 1-1. Week 3, Arkansas State takes them to 2-1. USC at home. I'll give the win to Michigan's defense here, although I don't think this game is necessarily a lock. But let's take them to 3-1 here. Minnesota, take them to 4-1. Saturday, October 12th at Washington, I have them losing that game, so that moves them to 4-2. The following week, they're still on the road, traveling to Champaign to face the Fighting Illini. That could be a trap game after the Huskies game, but let's give them the W and benefit of the doubt, move them to 5-2. Michigan State, another one that's not a lock, but I gave them the win there, 6-2. Oregon, November 9th, loss, moves them to 6-3. At Indiana, W takes them to 7-3. Northwestern win takes them to 8-3. And then I think they lose their final game to Ohio State in the game, which takes them to 8-4. So I have them under the 8.5 at the plus 122.
Yeah, and going by what you said there, I think that Washington game is going to be, I think that's the big one for the win total. Normally, I would say Fresno is a team that could potentially upset them. I don't think Fresno's team this year is going to be quite to the level of normal Fresno, but that's not saying much because I think this Fresno team could easily be, I mean, we're going to get to them in a few episodes later, but I think this is like a 10-2 Fresno team still. So I think they're still very good. It's just normally they have a little bit more firepower. And on the road at Michigan, I'm not sure that this is going to be the year Fresno could beat them. I wish they would have played them a few years ago because I think they really could have beat them then. But yeah, Fresno and Texas to start the season is an interesting start. That's not a cakewalk by any means. I do agree. I think Texas will lose, or Texas will beat them. USC is an interesting game also. Until we see USC's defense actually perform, obviously you've always got to go against them. I don't really think that at Washington game, I think Michigan's going to be okay in that game. I think Washington just has too much turnover. I mean, obviously we'll learn a little bit more as the season goes with them, but they're kind of an iffy team to me. But I do agree with you on that at Illinois. I think that's a very big trap game. But so you've got under the 8.5. So basically what you're telling me here. So I did a little wordplay here with the Michigan team. As many people know, many people in Columbus, Ohio like to refer to Ann Arbor as the whore because that's just the nickname they give it. Michigan's quarterback this year could be Alex Orgy. So are we going to have an orgy in the whore in Ann Arbor while the fans are singing "I Just Can't Look, It's Killing Me"? Like, I mean, we've got all kinds of stuff going on in Ann Arbor this year. Man. It's going to be a fun story to follow this year in Michigan because I'm not too sure that it's going to be that great of a season for the Wolverines.
Yeah.
All right. So if we move on to mine actually is going to match Reese. I have Ohio State winning the championship too. A quick game by game. I don't see them losing. Like if they lose, I think it is the at Oregon game. I'm not too concerned about any of these other games on their schedule. I don't know the odds yet for undefeated season. I haven't looked it up. But when we get to our future bet episode, that will probably be a bet that I take because I truly think that they're going to be an undefeated team this year. My win total I do have coming in Rutgers over 6.5 plus 130. And this is kind of an interesting one. I think this is more of a schedule benefit. I always talk about the schedule benefits, like with Louisville, and we talked about it with Vatek a few weeks ago. I'm very big on schedule benefits, and to me, this is probably as beneficial as a schedule you can possibly get. And when you're getting plus money at over 6.5, I love this bet. So they're starting Thursday, August 29th against Howard. I would like to think that's an easy win. Then the Zips are coming to town. I like that one. I do think we have a potential slip up here. We did talk about this game when we talked about Vatek, but they are going on the road to Vatek. So we'll give them a loss. So that's 2-1. Washington's got to come all the way across the country, and Washington is not a physical team. And I think Rutgers is going to be very physical. They're experienced. I love them winning this game too to put them at 3-1. A little bit of a stretch here at Nebraska, as you just mentioned. Nebraska is going to be one of those teams to watch out for. I do think Nebraska will get this one, so we'll go 3-2. Wisconsin coming to Rutgers. I actually like Rutgers in this one again. I'm going to put them at 4-2. UCLA coming across the country. Like I said, they're going all over the world. I like this one too. So that's 5-2. We'll give them a loss at USC. It's 5-3. I like them to come home and beat Minnesota. So that's 6-3. At Maryland, I don't think Maryland's going to be very good at all. So that's 7-3. Illinois at home. I like that one too. That's 8-3. And then they might, Michigan State on the road, I could see them losing. So that puts them at 8-4, which is still a game and a half over the win total. Rutgers is one of those teams. Shiano is such a physical coach. Like, this team is going to be ready to play. They're bringing a lot back. Four of their starters from the offensive line are coming back. They did bring in a quarterback transfer from Minnesota. His name is Ethan Kaliakmanis. He wasn't the best, but they don't need him to be the best, honestly. He just needs to come in and perform decent. That's what they need. They're a power run team. As long as they can complete short passes, dink and dunk, and just play ball control, that's what they're built for. Their defense is ridiculous. I just feel like this team is, I don't know. I always look at schedule and I look at plus money. And to me, this is the best bet in the Big Ten, other than probably Ohio State to win the championship. I like that one also.
Yeah.
All right. So moving on to our new head coaches in the conference. So first of all, I did mention him a little earlier, Jonathan Smith, Oregon State, one of the two teams left in the now Pac-2. Everyone kind of had an exodus from there. He is now the new head coach at Michigan State. Jedd Fisch, last year he was the coach at Arizona, who ended up being one of the hottest teams in college football. With the Kalen DeBoer leaving to take the Alabama job, Jedd Fisch has gone up to Washington. He did bring a few of his guys from Arizona with him, but he didn't bring the two best players from Arizona with him. So it'll be kind of interesting to watch, see what happens there. Curt Cignetti, he was JMU's head coach. We did talk about him a little bit last year also, just because JMU had that unbelievable season. He's now going to IU. He did bring in a lot of his guys from JMU with him, so I think it'll be interesting to follow there. Their schedule is really tough, so I'm not sure it's going to be that great of a year, but it will be fun to follow. Sharon Moore, he was the OC at Michigan last year. He also was their interim head coach a few games. He is now the head coach. Jim Harbaugh leaving to go to the Chargers. David Brown, he was the interim coach last year after some shit went down with Fitzgerald, and now he just has the full title as Northwestern head coach. Deshaun Foster, he was UCLA's running back coach. Chip Kelly has left to be the offensive coordinator at Ohio State. So Deshaun Foster is now the UCLA head coach. Reese, 6 new head coaches in the Big Ten. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we've got another conference with a lot of really stacked big name coaches, and then adding a couple additional ones here. A big name here for me is Jonathan Smith, obviously big hire for the Spartans. He brings with him a really quality transfer portal, along with Aiden Childs, as we talked about. I like the internal hire, keeping Sharon Moore at Michigan. Should be a smooth transition for the players and the university as a whole. Jedd Fisch, another interesting one here. He really turned around the program in Arizona, went 1-11 in year one, then 5-7 year two, 10-3 in his last year. He's now moved into a program that's got a lot more recruiting prowess, and overall a stronger program. So I'll be interested to see what happens with him moving that program. And yeah, I mean, overall, I think this should be an interesting season. I also like that Northwestern gave David Braun the nod to give him an opportunity to keep that head coaching position. So
yeah. And with that, so what was one thing we always do every week? What Big Ten coach you think has the most pressure on him this year?
I've got two. First one here, I think, is easier to digest, and that's Brett Bielema. He's gone 18-19 in the last 3 seasons, third sub 500 season in 4 years. I think that could mean giving him the boot. Second name may be a little surprising here, but I've got James Franklin. He constantly struggles to win big games. Looking at just Ohio State and Michigan alone, he's gone 4-16 in his time at Penn State. Now he has Oregon and Washington to contend with. Couple that with Franklin bringing in a new OC, Andy Kotelnicki, I think is his last name, to try to turn around what could potentially be a flop with Drew Aller. If Franklin misses the playoff this year, I think he could be out of a job. I don't think Penn State's going to continue to hold on to him if he's not able to push that win total with Ohio State and Michigan.
Yeah, so mine I had was actually, I think it's the obvious one too. It was Ryan Day. Like the fans have been all over his ass recently, and if there's not this is the setup year. Like this should be a cakewalk for Ohio State this year. They brought in the world in the portal. Chip Kelly's coming in to help with the offense. They're not going to take another loss this year. If Ohio State were to lose to Michigan this year, I don't care if they're 11-1. If they lose to Ohio State, it might, or if they lose to Michigan, that might be it. I mean, even at 11-1, they're going to make the playoff, and obviously they would still be in the conference championship in the way that the new one works. But I don't know. I don't think that the fans are going to take much more of this, especially after last year, because they were pretty over it last year.
Yeah.
All right, so some notable transfers coming in the class rankings for the Big Ten. So Oregon was actually the number 2 class in the nation. Ohio State was 9th. Washington was 11th. Michigan State at 12th. USC 19th. And Wisconsin was 23rd. A little surprising there. Some quarterback transfers. Dylan Gabriel, he's been the quarterback at Oklahoma, and he was at UCF. Now he's going to Oregon. Will Howard, which at one time I was saying was probably the best player in the portal until a few other guys went in. He's going to Ohio State. He was the quarterback at Kansas State. Aiden Childs, we've talked about him, coming over from Oregon State, going to Michigan State with his coach, Jonathan Smith. Julian Sayin, he was the backup at Alabama. He is also going to Ohio State. So there has been a little talk of some competition between Sayin and Howard. I do think Howard's going to be the clear-cut winner here, but judging by how I think a lot of their games are going to go this year, I think we'll probably see both of them. Dante Moore, we talked a lot about him last year, the freshman at UCLA. He transferred up to Oregon also. I do think it's Dylan Gabriel's job and that Gabriel will keep it, but it will be interesting to see what they do with Dante Moore this year. If anyone watches Mountain West football, Jaden Miava last year had a sneaky good year at UNLV. UNLV's has been a pretty down program, but last year they had a very good uprising. He's going to transfer to USC. USC, Miller Moss will still probably be the quarterback, obviously. He performed very well in the bowl game for him last year when Caleb didn't play. And Miller Moss is kind of getting a lot of hype, but Jaden Miava, we'll see what they end up doing with him. Tyler Van Dyke, he was at Miami. He was supposed to be the next big thing there, supposed to be a stud. Well, he wasn't. So now he's at Wisconsin. We'll see what they do with the Dairy Raid there with him. Curtis Rourke, he was at Ohio last year. Ohio was a very good MAC team. Rourke did have an injury midway through the season, and he's now going with Cignetti to Indiana. And Will Rogers, the Mississippi State head coach, is now the new head coach or the new quarterback for Jed Fish at Washington. Some other notable players, Caleb Downs, he was probably the best player in the portal. He's ridiculous. Cornerback from Alabama going to Ohio State. And probably the best running back that was in the portal from Ole Miss, Quinshon Judkins, also going to Ohio State. Like we talked earlier, Ohio State loaded themselves up in the portal. I think they're going to be very good. Evan Stewart, he was one of the top wide receiver transfers. He was from Texas A&M. He went to Oregon. Georgia cornerback A.J. Harris is going to Penn State. Jabbar Muhammad, which was one of my favorite players last year, because I watched a ton of Washington games last year. He was a stud. He actually transferred to one of the rivals. He's going to Oregon, which I love.
I was going to say, I know how much you love that.
Yeah, it's so stupid. Georgia cornerback Nyland Green is going to Purdue. It's an interesting choice. Houston defensive tackle Jamari Caldwell is now going to Oregon. UCLA safety Kamari Ramsey is going to USC, another rivalry transfer. Ohio State wide receiver Julian Fleming's going to Penn State. And USC linebacker Tackett Curtis is going to Wisconsin. Reese, overall, what are your thoughts on the transfers?
From a team perspective, I'm impressed with Jonathan Smith was able to do in East Lansing with the transfer portal in his first year. Ohio State and Oregon both killed it, which I think is to be expected. I like that the Huskies were able to keep pace despite losing a lot in terms of both coaching and players. A lot of big name transfers here. Excited to see what Dylan Gabriel and Will Howard are going to be able to do with their new teams. You know, I'm a huge fan of Quinshon Judkins and what he was able to do at Ole Miss, so it'll be fun to watch him in a Buckeye uniform. Another guy I'm interested to see work is Jaden, like you just talked about. We talked about him quite a bit last year, and I'm excited to see what he's going to be able to do in Lincoln Riley's offense post the Caleb Williams era.
All right. So, top 5 games that you want to see this year. What is your number 5 game for the Big Ten?
My number 5 game for the Big Ten is Washington at Oregon, November 30th. Border Wars been a big one for a while with the Pac-12. Now it moves to the Big Ten with quite a few changes. Fish moves into place for DeBoer. We have a new QB matchup with Gabriel against Mississippi State transfer Will Rogers. Huskies bested the Ducks twice last year, but the Ducks definitely have the better team in place this season, so it should be a same fireworks we're used to out of this game. But this is my number 5 is Washington at Oregon, November 30th.
Those were 2 of my favorite games of the season last year. Those were very fun. Obviously, they're going to be a lot different this year, but yeah, looking forward to that. My number 5 is the Big Ten debut for USC, going on the road to Michigan September 21st. Big road test. Obviously, like we just said, USC's defense has a lot to prove this year, and Michigan, we need to see what they're going to be this year. So I think it's going to be fun. Take them on a road to I think that's still the biggest Big Ten environment. I think that's bigger than the shoe. So it'll be a fun way for them to kick off the Big Ten. My number 4, and I'm iffy on this one, but it's obviously it's a situation, so it's got to be number 4. Ohio State at Penn State, November 2nd. It's a road game for Ohio State in one of the toughest environments. Like I said, I'm not sold on Penn State, and that's where my doubt comes in. Obviously, they're going to have to prove a lot to me. But by November 2nd, they should be as well-versed in what they're doing and ready to go as they can be for that game. And a late season loss for Ohio State right before Michigan could be huge. What is your number 4 game?
My number 4 here is Michigan at Washington. Rematch of the Natty from last year, but as we talked about earlier with Michigan and just a second ago with Washington, both of these teams definitely look different. Decision maker, I think, is going to be how Michigan's defense can control Washington's offense, and if Fish is able to get the ball rolling there with all of those changes to the offense. But this is my number 4 is Michigan at Washington, October 5th.
And what do you got for number 3?
Number 3, I have Oregon at Michigan, November 2nd. Oregon traveling to Ann Arbor. If the Ducks are going to win the Big Ten title in their first year in the conference, they're going to need to win big road games, and it starts here. So this is what I have for my number 3 is Oregon at Michigan.
That is also my number 3.
Very nice.
Number 2, I've got Ohio State at Oregon, October 12th. This is the other road test for Ohio State that I think is huge. It's going to be a scene out there in Eugene. It's a smaller stadium, but it's a loud stadium. Generally, when you're playing out there, it's probably going to be some rain too. We're going to have a little bit of weather. It's typical out there. I just think this is another one of those tests for Ohio State that we're not going to get to see that often this year. So I'm looking forward to this one and them going on the road to Oregon. What is your number 2?
I think we may have these 2 games flip-flop. My number 2 is Michigan at Ohio State, November 30th. One of the biggest sports rivalries in general. So it's always going to be one of the best games of the season, even if one of them is possibly going to have a bit of a down year. Michigan's definitely not the same team they were last year, and I don't think this is a win and in game like it has been in years past, but Day hasn't beat Michigan in the last 3 years. He's going to have to get it done this year, so that's my number 2 game.
And you're right. So I'm guessing we have it flipped because my number 1 is Michigan at Ohio State. Obviously, it's the biggest conference game of the year. We really don't need to put more words into it. It's like I said, this might be Ryan Day's job. So what was your number 1?
Yeah, my number 1, Ohio State at Oregon, October 12th. I can't wait. This is the first in what is going to be, I think, 2, if not potentially 3 matchups between these two teams if they meet in the regular season again in the Big Ten
Yeah.
title and then somehow cross each other in the 12-team playoff. That's not happened since the 1800s from what I could see. So we have a shot of that happening this year. First game being in Autzen this early in the year is really going to create fireworks. I'm excited to see what Gabriel's going to do in that Oregon offense, how Will Howard is going to perform with all the weapons that they have. So this is my number one game is Ohio State at Oregon, October 12th.
Yeah, three times in 1 year would be interesting. But yeah, so that's our top 5 games for the conference this year. Let's kick off our offensive player of the year predictions. Reese, who do you have for your offensive Big Ten player of the year?
On the offensive side of the ball, I'll be surprised if it's not Dylan Gabriel. Dan Lanning's offense naturally puts up a lot of points. You saw what they were able to do with Bo Nix last year. Pac-12 was pretty consistently the top scoring conference in the country, so seeing Oregon move to the Big Ten should be fun to watch as they're forced to battle some more defensive-minded teams like we talked about earlier. A couple other guys to watch out for would be the 3 big names at Ohio State: Will Howard, Quinshon Judkins, Emeka Egbuka. But I think it's Gabriel's to lose. Tez Johnson is another one that I think is a little bit more of a long shot. Evan Stewart coming in is likely going to take some touches away from Tez, but he is a stud in his own right. So those are a couple other guys to watch out for, but I'm predicting Dylan Gabriel.
So mine's a little bit of a risky pick because I think he's going to, I know he's going to be splitting time. I actually went with Quinshon Judkins, running back from Ohio State. I know TreVeyon Henderson is back, but with Chip Kelly coming in to run the offense at Ohio State, I think both running backs are going to go nuts. And I think Judkins will have a little bit more of the numbers, and I see them being the best team in the Big Ten. So I just think for potential, I think player of the year, I'm going Quinshon Judkins, running back from Ohio State. Defensive player of the year, I'm just going with a team that traditionally is all defense and only defense. So I'm taking Jay Higgins, linebacker from Iowa. Reese, who do you have for your Big Ten defensive player of the year?
I've got another defensive team in Michigan. I've got Mason Graham is the one that I'm eyeing. Another Wolverine that could be in the picture. Cornerback Will Johnson. It's been over 20 years since the cornerbacks won, but he's a dude that could break that streak. I can see him very easily falling into a top 5 pick in the draft when he enters. I do have Jay Huggins, linebacker out of Iowa. A couple other guys, Abdul Carter, edge at Penn State. And then we talked about him earlier, Caleb Downs at Ohio State. I think it's going to be a little bit more difficult for him because I correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think he might be playing safety instead of cornerback. And if he's playing safety,
I have a feeling he's going to be everywhere. I think he'll probably play all around, like a star.
Yeah, right. Which makes sense. And if he does spend some time at safety, I think that's going to take away some potential picks and things like that could drive him up to be the defensive player of the year. So I've got Mason Graham at Michigan as my selection.
All right, we're going to close it out with the Big Ten championship game and who wins. I think we're equal here, but Reese, what do we got?
Yeah, I've got Ohio State playing the Ducks in the Big Ten title game. Definitely going to be a shootout. I think this is going to end up being one of the best games of the year, but it is Ohio State's game to lose. 3 years straight since they beat Michigan with Harbaugh out of the way and a team in somewhat of a transition phase to the next chapter. I think this is the year Day has to make a statement. We've talked about that a lot on this show. They have the talent and the depth to do it. Killed the transfer portal, returned several starters. They have the best backfield in college football with Judkins and TreVeyon Henderson, like you just talked about. Another loaded wide receiver room. Chip Kelly comes in to take over on offense from Ryan Day. All the stars are aligned for the Buckeyes. So if there's one team that can stop them, it's going to be the Ducks, which is why I have them playing in the Big Ten title. I do have the Buckeyes winning, final score 38-31.
Wow. I don't even think it would be that close. I'm not as big on Oregon as people are this year. I need to see a little bit from them. I do think they do benefit from the schedule, though. It's not that tough of a schedule. I agree. We have the same game and same winner. Ohio State and Oregon in Lucas Oil Stadium. And Ohio State wins, securing themselves one of the byes in the 12-team playoff. And I think Oregon, here in a few weeks, we're going to do our first 12-team playoff prediction. I think it'll be interesting to see if Oregon is in our playoff predictions when we get there. It'll be fun. It's going to be fun to mess with this 12-team playoff for the first time. All right. We will return next week as we will go over the Big 12 preview, another conference bringing in all kinds of teams and movement all over the place. And we finally will get to talk about our thoughts on Colorado this year. Last year, we had mixed opinions. Mine hasn't changed much. Little sneak peek for next year or next week.
Mine has another sneak peek. Hey,
So,
one more Big Ten prediction. Do you think that there is a particular Florida team in Tallahassee that is going to end up in this conference this time next year?
So I think this episode is going to be released on July 16th. By August 15th of this year, I think we're going to have some news. I think we're less than a month away from hearing that a certain team from Tallahassee is going to be in the Big Ten next year. So,
And what was the news that just came out not a few days ago about the ruling for Florida State?
So the agreement between the ACC and the ESPN that was trying to be kept very secretive and no one was allowed to see it and all of that is now being able to be handed out to everyone. So it will be public knowledge, and just see how ridiculous that this agreement really was and how everyone was getting screwed. It's obvious why Florida State's getting out for money purposes. There's going to be so much more money. It's the ACC is a joke of a conference, and I cannot wait to be out of it. And it's going to happen very soon. I truly think by this August 15th date, we're going to have some information. And it might be, I guess there is a possibility of maybe having to be in the ACC for one more year. But from what I'm reading, I don't think that that's a for sure thing. I think we might have a 50-50 shot of being out for next year. So,
Well, and even if there's a buyout that's involved for Florida State somehow, like the revenue money that they're going to gain in year one for Big Ten, I think will be worth it.
well, and the buyout's not going to be nearly as high now because the ACC has realized they've shit their pants, and they're going to have to settle. They're not going to get that gigantic buyout that they thought they were going to get. They're going to have to settle for a very, very low amount because they realize they're in the wrong. So everything's trending in the positive direction for Florida State winning this battle.
All right.
We'll have a little bit more on that each week as the information comes out. But that is it for the Big Ten. Like I said, next week we'll be back with the Big 12. So for Reese Downing, I am Jacob Workman, and that is it for our Big Ten preview. See you, everyone.
Cheers, guys.